We come now to a question from a listener in Hanover, Illinois, who writes, "Could you please explain the statement Jesus made, 'Do not cast your pearls before swine'?"
Let me say that is found in the so-called Sermon on the Mount, and it's in a series of injunctions which he gave that had to do with, he started by saying, "Judge not, that ye be not judged." And that is, he didn't say that you're going to be judged with the kind of judgment that you judge other folk, but rather that if you're a critic of other people, constantly sitting in judgment on others, then you'll be known as that kind of person. You're going to be judged. The interesting thing is that down here, as a human being, if you become a judge, you're going to find out that you're going to be judged also by your peers and those that are round about you. And if you're known as that kind of a person, well, you'll be known as that kind of a person. And then he gave a series of talks. He said, "Thou hypocrite, first cast the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast the mote out of thy brother's eye." Don't be trying to take a mote out of somebody else's eye when you've got a beam in your own. And the contrast, of course, is that you're judging some little thing in someone else, whereas you may be guilty of things far more serious. And that would be like, for instance, you judge some person, maybe you say this Ms. So-and-so uses too much lipstick. Well, that's a very small item, by the way, and maybe she needs that much, I don't know, but you judge her for that. Well, may I say to you, this business of gossip is lots worse than using lipstick, and sitting in judgment is lots worse, so that you have the beam and she has the mote in her eye. And then he goes on to say, "Give not that which is holy unto dogs." Now, Gentiles were known in that day as dogs. Israel didn't have a very high estimation of Gentiles. And neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. Well, this is something that is maybe a little difficult to interpret, but I think the Lord meant it like this. There are certain people that you're wasting your time witnessing to them. Now, that may seem very strange to you, but there are times, there are situations, and there are people that it's worthless for you to attempt to witness to them. Let me give you an example of what I mean. When I was pastor in Nashville, there was a man that I had known when I worked in the bank. He had become actually an alcoholic, and his wife was getting ready to leave him. But he was a man that had gained some prominence. He had been elected to the state legislature, and he had a wonderful conversion coming out of Murfreesboro. One night he saw a tent up of an evangelist, and he stopped. He was about half drunk then. He was going into Nashville to get a room in a hotel, and he intended to commit suicide because his wife said she'd had enough. She was going to leave him. Well, he went into that tent, sat in the back, and went to sleep. And after the service, they came and sobered him up. He was pretty well known to the people in the town, and several interested in him, sobered him up. And then the evangelist talked to him, presented the gospel to him, and he was really soundly converted. It was a tremendous change. He never tasted a drop from that day to the present. Now, it got back to the legislature what he'd done, that he'd been converted. He was known for the fun and the kidding that he carried on when he was in the legislature, so the minute he walked in, they began to kid him. They said, "Here comes Deacon so-and-so." And they told him, finally somebody said, "Preach us a sermon." And others gave out the same cry, and they were making quite a bit of it. And the moderator, he rapped for order, but he couldn't get it. And finally this fellow stood to his feet. And all he said was this. He said, "My Lord told me not to cast my pearls before swine." And he sat down. May I say to you, that was the best use of that passage of Scripture that I've ever heard. That was very appropriate at that time. For that godless legislature was kidding him. They did not want to hear the gospel. They were not interested in it at all. They were ridiculing him and the stand that he had taken. And I would say that he used that verse of Scripture to very good advantage. And I think that there are times when you should not witness at all. I have another friend here in California. This fellow was drunk, and a friend of his, and he came to him and he said, "I'm drunk and I want you to talk to me and give me the gospel." He told the man, he says, "You go and sober up and I'll give you the gospel, as you're in no condition to hear it now." That would have been casting pearls before swine.